Fourth session, as we approach lunchtime, we are going to increase your appetite by talking about food and food from all different parts of India, north, south, east and west. I request our guests, Lathika George, Kavery Ponnapa, Neerja, Mattoo and Fatima Silva Gracias to kindly take their place on the dais. Our guests will very briefly talk about their work and the books that they have published in the Cuisine, and then Fatima will take over as the moderator of the session and she will be in conversation with them. So Fatima, I think we can start with you.
Good afternoon. I'm Fatima Gracias. I have written a book on food, Cuisine in Goa, which was released in 2011. I also have written some papers on food. My main work is in the field of history, and I have written on women, I have written on health, and I have written on several other aspects. I think I'll give the mic to Kavery Ponnapa.
Good afternoon, I'm Kavery Ponnapa. I have written a book called The Vanishing Korwas, which is a cultural study of the Korwa people, also known as Kurds. It's a fairly extensive cultural study, and although I haven't written a cookbook or a book about food, I blog extensively on the food of the Korwas. It's called the Kurd Table, because it's a blog I started because it's so deeply connected to our culture and identity as a people.
Hello, I'm Neerja Mattoo from Kashmir. I have also written a cookbook about Kashmiri cuisine. But actually, you see, I've written that book because there are so many misunderstandings about Kashmir in the rest of the country, and not to speak of the rest of the world, that I wanted the Kashmiris to project themselves as they are and how food constitutes a very, very important part of their lives. So I'll be happy to speak to you about Kashmiri food in a little while.
Good afternoon, I'm Lathika George, and I've written a cookbook memoir called The Suryani Kitchen about my community, the Syrian Christians of India. And I chose to accompany the cookbook with stories and a history of our community because I thought that was about our story. And what better way to write about our story than accompany it with food. And I think food tells stories like no other medium. So.
Food is a marker of identity. Food is not just food. It's a way at getting to something else. It's the way who we are. It tells us who we are, who we have been, and who we want to be. We have with us, I'll start with Lathika George because I have read her book and I found it very interesting. I read it about 4 years ago in 2010. Around this time, at Christmas time, my daughter presented me with your book and she said, I must read. She said it is very interesting. And that was the time when I was writing about Goan cuisine, Cuisine de Goa. I was researching for that book that was published the following year. And I find her book very nice in the sense that it's not just recipes, but it tells quite a bit about her community, the Syrian Christians, the various food that is cooked for various occasions, and so many other things. A very interesting, very nice and nicely done book. So, Lathika, will you tell me something more about your book and your writings? I mean, probably you by now you have written more books. Yeah?
I'm a landscape designer, but not really a cookbook writer, but I think in today's world we are known as foodies. I mean, that's how we're termed. Like, so I love food, I love cooking, and I think food is a great way of telling stories. And I was in New York actually, and I met a publisher there who had been to Kerala. And he had heard about the Syrian Christians, didn't know anything much about them, except that there were a lot of Georges and Thomases, and they seemed to be an old Christian community. So he said, why don't you write this book? Why don't you tell us something about yourself? And I said, who's actually going to want to learn about, know anything about Syrian Christians? In the first place, there was some confusion between Syria, the Syrians, and Syrian Christians of India. Though we do trace our origins to Syria, it was so distant, and so we called the book the Kerala Kitchen in the US, where it was published first. And in India it became the Suryani kitchen because we're known as Suryanis or Nasranis. So the thing is, it was not planned at all. I planned to write fiction, and I planned to write about gardening, about landscaping, which I do write a lot about. And ultimately it really became my story. I grew up in Bombay and in some ways distant from Kerala. Though my mother insisted on us having Kerala meals at least at lunch or at dinner, and I think it became a way for us to connect with our roots.
Even when you were in New York?
Wherever I went. I think I ended up cooking Kerala food for everyone. In fact, I'm staying with another delegate for my trip, the rest of my trip, a Spanish lady, and she says, you have to cook for us. That's so great. I mean, it's not something I planned. Thank you so much.
Now we're going to Kavery, Ponnapa. Last night I was looking at your book and I was impressed with your tome, The Vanishing Kodavas. It's really a huge book and it must have involved many years of research. Yeah, can you tell us something about it and about your food? Because I find there are many things also. Similar things that we do here in Goa. You talk about wild mushrooms, you talk about bamboo shoots. And during the rainy season, during the monsoons, we also have wild mushrooms in Goa, which are now today considered as a delicacy because you don't get them easily. So tell us something about it.
Well, the book is a tome, as you say, and it took 15 years of research. I'm always very embarrassed to confess this because when I started off, I thought maybe 2 years in the field and I'd have all the material I wanted. But the deeper I got into it, the more I realized there were so many nuances of a culture that you really have to go into if you want to represent it fairly. So that is a separate work. It's a cultural study. The food writing began basically because, as Lathika said, so much of it is identity. And if you look at cuisine and memory and taste, it's all linked up to landscape, at least for us in Coorg, and I know for most other people. And when you look at landscape, automatically you start looking at history and how people have grown over hundreds and hundreds of years. How they balanced themselves with the environment, understood it. So in Coorg, our cuisine is based on, we were essentially hunters, warriors and farmers, mostly in that order. And a lot of forest produce, a lot of seasonal produce, a lot of wild game, and then of course rice as a staple. But I think what happened when I began to write about food was that I realized how much of it was linked to our own perception as people. Our festivals, the whole year, and how it sort of spun itself out, special ingredients. So.
Lathika has told us something a bit about herself, so also Kavery. Now Neerja comes from Kashmir and she has written about the best of Kashmiri food. And let's hear what she has to tell us about the Kashmiri food.
Actually, you see, I don't claim to be a great cook myself. And but I come from a family of great cooks, my mother for instance. And why this book was written, there are two reasons. You see, my book is called Sal. Sal is Kashmiri for a feast. It's called Sal, a feast of Kashmiri cuisine. And because you see, I'm also into translations. So there was a publisher in Delhi who said, who was ready to publish my book of translations, provided I could recommend somebody who could write a Kashmiri book on Kashmiri cuisine. So I thought that why don't I do it myself? And also these were the 90s, when everything about Kashmir was getting distorted and people had no way to celebrate, to link Kashmir with any kind of celebrations. So food for Kashmiris is a very, very important constituent of their identity. And the interesting thing is that the Kashmiri Pandits, who are Hindus, who constitute a small minority, have almost the same food habits as the vast Muslim majority. Both communities are obsessed with mutton. Though Kashmiri Pandits are Brahmins, but in Kashmir they all eat meat. And this is one of the ways in which the syncretic culture of Kashmir has also evolved, because the names of dishes are the same, the ingredients mostly are the same, but there are certain differences in the ingredients that are used. So in a way what happens is that food acts more as a syncretic, connecting resource, as well as sometimes a divisive one. Because sometimes one community sort of looks down upon the other community, oh, they are dali batas. Kashmiri Pandits were sometimes referred to as dali batas, because on all their holy, festivals, they would suddenly become vegetarian. And for the rest of the year, they would be voracious meat eaters. And for the same reason, the Kashmiri Pandits sometimes would call the Muslims Gandasas, that these are people who subsist on onions. Because onions did not constitute an ingredient in Kashmiri Pandit mutton dishes also. So we avoided onion and garlic, and they avoided asafoetida. So there was a thing between we and they, us and them. But when it came actually to eating the food, then of course both sides relished each other's food very much. And because of the novelty of the flavor also sometimes. And not only are Kashmiris obsessed with meat, but they are also obsessed with the feeling that their leafy vegetables are the best in the world. No matter where a Kashmiri goes, you may serve him the best of spinach. There's nothing like what happens in Kashmir. You serve him the aubergines or eggplants or brinjals, whatever you call it. He says, oh, absolutely nothing to do with the taste of vegetables there. But of course, that the floods destroyed all those vegetables this time is another story. But the Kashmiri, you will see wherever he goes, if he has a little patch of land, he will try to cultivate haak. Haak is our large green leafy vegetable, which is cooked in the simplest of ways. No spices, nothing except a green chili. The Muslims add garlic, and the Pandits add asafoetida, hing, and that's it. And the name for subsistence meal for a Kashmiri Pandit is haak bat. If a person can get haak and rice, that's more than enough. It's like the North Indian dal roti. We don't think of dal as food at all, except when it is used as a contemptuous term. And we have infinite varieties of mutton dishes, unimaginable. And the Muslim, elaborate meal is called the Wazwan. Wazwan literally translated means a bazaar of cooks. So you can't have one cook. There is a whole assembly, and they are specialists in different kind of processes of the food. Somebody will chop, somebody will cut, somebody will pound, and others will mix. It's a festival. And another interesting thing about Kashmiri food as identity, which I think makes them distinct from other communities. Maybe I'm ignorant, you can educate me if there are other instances. But what happens is that in festivals, certain festivals associated with some Sufi saints, the Muslims will not eat any mutton at all. They will suddenly become vegetarian for a whole week, which is unimaginable normally. And the Pandits, when they celebrate their Shivratri, the focus is on how many kinds of mutton dishes they can cook, which horrifies South Indians. How can you have non-vegetarian meal on a Shivratri? But we do have that. And fish and mutton and wild duck and everything, that's all a part of our cuisine. So in a way, the Kashmiris have evolved a cuisine which in a way unites them as well as sometimes divides them.
It's a very interesting information. And here in Goa also, the Hindu community, they eat chicken, and some people might eat mutton, but on festive religious occasions, they are fully vegetarian, even on the wedding day and other religious occasions. Now, can you tell me what this Kashmiris they eat only mutton or they eat some other meat?
You see, Kashmiri Pandits actually traditionally only ate mutton. They wouldn't touch chicken. They wouldn't touch eggs. But they loved wild duck and wild fowl, which are abundant in Kashmir in winter. I suppose it has something to do with the climate also. You know, in winter, it used to be snowbound the valley and disconnected from the rest of the country. So fresh vegetables were not available except for this ubiquitous hawk, which is available even when the fields are covered with snow. The leaves will peep out and you can pick them and eat them. So that is why they probably had to be non-vegetarian, number one. But you know, traditionally they wouldn't eat chicken or egg. But they would, even the very old ladies would love to eat wild duck eggs. And they would put them in the kangri. Kangri, you know, is a fire pot, which is actually a lifesaver for poor Kashmiris. And in that they would put the eggs and they would be roasted very nicely. Then they carried their own kitchen with them wherever they went. Anything else you would like to say?
Later on, now I have a question for Lathika. Can you tell me if there have been changes in the Suryani cuisine over the years, over the period? Has it remained as it was, or has it undergone changes? Are there any new trends in your cuisine?
Actually, my book is about traditional Suryani cuisine, but definitely I see a lot of changes. I mean, biryani is not really in our cuisine, but we've made it our own. We've made the egg roast, which is actually a daba food, you can say. The egg roast is a very Kerala kind of dish, you know, but we sort of claimed it for our own. It's with a lot of onions, browned onions, and it's also made into an egg puff. And we usually have it for breakfast or in the evening with, wheat flour parathas. So a lot of other foods have been incorporated, and I think we tend to steal from all the communities in Kerala. So Syrian Christians have a strict time of Lent and fasting, and that's when we borrow from the Hindus. So yeah, during Lent, because you're supposed to be vegetarian if you're not fasting, so we cook all the vegetarian foods that they have. I don't know if you've heard of the Onam Sadhya. It's an elaborate vegetarian meal that is served during Onam. But we tend to make almost all of it. So we go a bit overboard with that. It's supposed to be austerity, but it's a time for eating a lot of vegetables for us during Lent.
And what about Onam?
For Onam, we eat everything that they have. And for feasting, we borrow from the Muslims with their biryanis and their fabulous dishes. But I think originally we were fish eaters. Very much like Goa, use a lot of kokum, like I think both your communities do. Yes, about yeah. I think our appams are similar to your sannas and also to, you also make puttu. Yes, a lot of steamed, there are some similarities I think to it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the use of coconut I think is universal in South India, not so much in Kurg I think, a little less, yeah. I think we Malayalis can't live without our coconuts. So there's coconut in just about everything. And coconut oil, coconut milk, coconut in every form you can think of. So, yeah.
No, I just wanted to pick up something about, talking about Kashmiris and how they feel that their greens are the best. And I've always been fascinated by the fact that the French have always, they've had this concept of terroir, where their land, their rocks, their soil, their minerals produce something exceptional. But if you look at most communities, they have that concept. I might not call it that, because just as the Kashmiris think that the best greens are what are the ones grown in Kashmir, with the Korwas you find, they in the first place they eat everything from wild boar to venison to partridge, quail. This was a huge part. Yes, and they rarely, if ever, fast. I mean, the concept of fasting does not exist in Kurg. If it is there, it's a very new one. But this thing about landscape and terroir, I think it just sort of so much of emotion bubbles up, because you find that people are salting bamboo shoot, or they're trying to dry mushrooms and send it across the world because they want to taste and be connected back to their culture and their ancestral homes and their clans. And so it's a hugely emotional issue, and I perfectly understand when she says that this is Kashmiris think this is the best. We do. It's one of our greatest delicacies. And initially, of course, it was wild boar, because the forests were, there was plenty of wild game. And we also had this very, very effective way of, we had very severe monsoons in Kurg, very much like Kerala and Goa. So there was a lot of salting and drying of meat, which was done in our kitchens or outdoors. And also preserved vegetables. We preserved vegetables like pumpkins and mango, cucumber, marrows. They were sort of put into attics, and that was what saw us through the monsoons, because the rains were torrential, and all the kitchen gardens were, fields were flooded. And then also, during the monsoon, the landscape itself provided you with a lot of little leafy greens, very localized, which supplemented the lack of fresh food during that spell. So, in fact, rice, of course, was the one thing that bound everything together. And you mentioned puttus, Lathika. Our cuisine is centered around puttus, but we make them slightly differently than Kerala. And just one more thing I'd like to add before I pass on the mic. We all think that we invented our foods, and there was nothing before the Korwas were cooking X, Y, or Z dish. A couple of years back, I was invited to a Mapla wedding in Calicut, and I was completely shocked, right? And the place of honor was Neerja, which is translated ghee rice, exactly how we make it in Kurg, and we call it Neerja. The flavors, the textures, everything was identical. The same with the Mapla goat's head curry. We make the same thing in Kurg. So this is where I feel, because Kurg traded rice with Malabar for centuries. And yes, I think this is what must have happened.
Can you tell us something more about food that you cook on a festive occasion, like weddings and
other religious maybe occasions?
I think I'll start with the weddings and the feasts because the Kurds are a bit dodgy when it comes to religious occasions. They're very simple in their worship. And if I were to take one of the most important festivals, which has now lost its significance because hunting has been banned, we actually, through our history, we worship the god of the hunt. So anytime the men went hunting, they followed very strict rules and regulations. There was a specific way an animal could be hunted. You never hunted during the breeding season. And when you killed, you had to first make an offering to the forest gods of the liver of the animal. You roasted it in the forest, you ate it, you offered it, you ate it as a sort of... No, you ate it there. The men ate it, and only then they carved up the animal. So at this time, it's called Kailpot, and now it's held on the 3rd of September every year. You always have traditional Korwa bandi curry, which is the pork curry, which is cooked in dark roasted spices, and kachampuri is a key ingredient in our cuisine. It's a kind of a very dark condensed vinegar made from the same fruit as, same family actually as kokum. It grows in Perth as well. And it's a slightly, I think botanically it has a different name. But instead of drying it, what we do is we collect the ripe fruits and we allow it to lie in the sun in these baskets, and it breaks down. So then you collect the juices and boil it down, and you have something like a thick, sour vinegar. And it's indestructible, it lasts forever. So you have this, you have the pork curry, and then you have karambutus, which are steamed. The vinegar doesn't spoil. Yeah, you have to put it in any non-reactive kind of a container, either glass or ceramic, and a non-metallic top. And it just keeps getting more and more thick, and it gets more intense in flavor. As I have 22-year-old kachampuri, which is still going strong. Yeah, it doesn't spoil. So then you would have this pandi curry, and you would have karambutus, which are steamed sort of round rice dumplings. And
you use this vinegar?
We do, on everything, in vegetables, fish, meat, wild game, whatever it is, we use this vinegar. And the thing about Korwa cuisine is that it's very varied, but you would never have. Recently somebody asked me about what would you have on your plate? And actually on our plate at one time there's very little. You have your classic puttu and curry combinations, and they go perfectly together. So while you might have a lot of food offered at a feast, what you would eat on your plate at one time is very little. It's just two, like a puttu and a curry, and maybe you'll have one vegetable, and that's how it goes.
Neerja, can you tell us something about your food connected to rituals or rituals connected to food? Before I do that, there are two things which I want to tell you. One is that in Kashmir, neither the Muslims nor the Hindus eat pork or beef. Because you see, Muslims also accept when they are very poor, living on the fringes. In the cities, it's supposed to be something, not worth eating. Beef is looked down upon. Because you see, we don't have a proper slaughterhouse or anything. So these are stray cattle which somebody might suddenly decide to butcher. So somehow it is supposed to be low-class food. That is one thing. And another thing is that we dry our vegetables. They are dehydrated in the autumn sun, and they are kept. And turnips and brinjals, tomatoes, these bottle gourds, all these things are preserved from India. They're just dried, they're sun dried. and then they can keep for a whole year. They remain for a whole year. And actually, you see, even now, if you see a Kashmiri traveling out of Kashmir for winter, he'll be carrying a whole load of these dried vegetables because he doesn't trust the local vegetables in other parts of the country. Now, as you were asking me about festival ritual, you see, first of all, when it is a daughter's wedding, the food that is served to the bridegroom is totally vegetarian. That is totally vegetarian, but a day previous you have a feast with all mutton, and then the next day after the wedding again you invite the baratis because you think you haven't fed them well enough for vegetarian food. So next day you go back to your non-vegetarian, but there is an infinite variety of this vegetarian food. Because I told you about the vegetables and they are cooked in different ways, and interestingly they are given the names that are given to non-vegetarian dishes. For instance, yakhni. You will have a yakhni of bottle gourd, or a yakhni of lotus stem, or you will have a rogan josh of this kohlrabi. You call it a rogan josh because it looks like rogan josh. There are chunks of these kohlrabi roots which are, you see, actually sauteed till they become brown and then they look like rogan josh. So, but that is it. And as far as our other Hindu festivals are concerned, they become an excuse to eat huge varieties of vegetarian food. There is no concept of fasting as such. It's only that you don't eat cereal. But you have this, what you call singara, water chestnut, flour. Because water chestnut grows in Kashmir, and then they are dried and actually pounded, and you have this powdery thing of which you can make puris, you can make halwa, you can make all kinds of things, and it's supposed to be a fast, but you have the best food on that fast day. And the Muslims, of course, they fast for Ramadan, but again, they will break the fast with this a sharbat made of basil seeds, and they add all kinds of delicacies like almonds and cardamom and cinnamon and everything. It becomes a delicious drink. So they break the fast with that, and rest of the time they cook the best kind of food. And surprisingly, I'll tell you, we have these terrible, devastating floods where people were marooned in their houses. But luckily for them, again a Kashmiri obsession for storing food. So nobody died of starvation, even though they were marooned for 7-8 days. But they had enough food in the attic to last them. Because you see, Kashmiris have these huge vessels in which they store rice. They don't buy rice by kilos or stuff. They buy rice by quintals. And it is stored because we have this fear, first of all, of the winter. Now there is the fear of the uncertainties also. And now it was a good thing that this fear continued because it saved people's lives during the floods. So there was enough food and they could share it, to sort of make baskets and pass on to their neighbors and stuff. Because it's like that.
Lathika, I have a question.
Yeah.
I would like to know how you market your food groups.
My publishers actually do the distribution, so I don't think I have any connection with that, but I think that's the way it usually works. But going back to the same question you asked them, it's not celebration, it's a time of fasting again when I'm reminded of my heritage, strangely. Because the 40 days of fasting actually sort of highlight what we're all about. And the day before Good Friday, that's Monday, Thursday, the night, actually we have a ceremony that's called, it's very similar to Passover in Israel. And again, it reminds me of who I am as a person. And my identity as a Suryani, which is every day in India, I'm not reminded about it at all. And we have this ritual which is very similar to what the Jews I think they call it Passover, but we call it Pesach, and we dip an unleavened bread into coconut milk, which again goes back to our life in Kerala. So it culminates in that. It's me, a Malayali, a Suryani, living in Kerala 2000 years away from where we started. So I think the very simple meal of unleavened bread and coconut milk would sort of define my identity. So,
Thank you, Lathika. Thank you, Neerja and Kavery. Now we invite questions from the audience.
I'm also a Kashmiri and I happen to be her husband. So I'll ask her So I wanted to know that Kashmiri Pandits generally all over the country are vegetarian. But in Kashmir, they are not vegetarian. And on weddings also they cook variety of mutton dishes. So I would like to know what are the mutton dishes served? And also vegetarian dishes. Both mutton and vegetarian. But on weddings, both mutton and vegetarian dishes are also on different days.
Yes, I think you were probably not listening when I said.
Doesn't
I
matter.
said that the vegetables that are cooked are also given the same name as non-vegetarian dishes are done. So we have the Majro Kanjosh, we have the Tamini Kaliya. Kaliya is a same recipe, but the main ingredient is vegetarian. It's the same recipe. You have not.
No, but so light on this because at certain occasions only vegetarian food is served. And at certain occasions meat dishes are made. And meat dishes run into about 10 to 12 dishes are made.
I think I mentioned all that. And if you have any more questions, I will answer them outside. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd just like to add one more thing, which is actually, I think it's so much, it's so important and such a part of me that I actually forgot to mention it. We worship our ancestors in Kul, and anytime a special meal is cooked or there's a feast or a celebration of any kind, before any of us eat, we make a little platter of little bits of all the cooked food, and it's first offered to our ancestors. It's a very simple ritual where you place this platter in a special room or in front of a lit lamp, and you ask for their protection and their blessings, and you leave it there because we believe that they actually come and consume the food. And of course it always has to have a little offering of alcohol as well. So this is crucial. Nobody would eat.
This reminds me that I would like to add something. You see, we Kashmiri Pandits believe that in winter all kinds of spirits and kinds of demons are also, on hand. They can pounce at any time. So they have to be appeased. So there is a Ghar Devta, somebody who resides in the attic of your house, a spirit. And the spirit has to be appeased with fish. And then there is the fear that the Yaksh, the Mahabharat Yaksh, might sneak in winter. So for him, special khichdi with special mutton dishes and everything is cooked. And then it is believed that if you satisfy the Yaksh, you may be able to steal his cap. And then he will become your slave for life. But it doesn't happen, hasn't happened to anyone yet. But Yaksh continues to be fed. I don't know whether a cat eats that food or what, but people feel that they are safe, that they have given him the best of it. You see, offering it to ancestors is only when a person has died. For that whole year, we will not eat anything before something is given to the birds, in memory of it.
Is fish available in winter easily?
Beg your pardon?
Is fish available?
Yes, we have abundant fish. In fact, we have...
In winter, I'm asking about.
Beg your pardon?
During the winter.
In winter, during the hot couple of months of summer people don't eat fish, but in winter it's a very important constituent. And also sometimes because of the weather and the climate, you can cook this fish in a special kind of a beverage that is made of rice water and other things which also keeps, like vinegar. And when you add to it, it gives it a special flavor. So fish is, but we have dried fish, lots of dried fish which are a delicacy. And again, as I told you, when you see the luggage of a Kashmiri who is traveling out of Kashmir in winter, you will find some dried fish certainly and other things. And yes, but interestingly, fish doesn't form a part of the vazwan or any festive meal. Fish is supposed to be eaten by itself. It's not a part of the feast as such.
Do you eat dried fish for festive occasions?
No, not for festive occasions. They are dried, but fish, in fact, we have the best trout in the world, we think, because the seed came from Scotland. And trout is a great favorite. And then we have these miraka. And then we also used to have masi, which is huge and fleshy and everything. Fish is very important.
Yeah, here in Goa also we eat dry fish, but then only during the monsoons when other fish, fresh fish is not available. Yeah.
I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
Kashmiri Pandits don't eat fowl.
No, they don't eat chicken. Wild fowl they eat.
Why can't you eat chickens?
Chicken because they think that the chicken feeds on garbage. Oh, that is the prime reason.
And the pork doesn't?
The fowl is wild. It just it goes into the water, it flies in the air, it doesn't feed on all kinds of
Then you
rubbish.
eat.
You have something to say, Lathika?
I was just going to ask actually all of you if there is any particular dish in your cuisine that defines who you are. And we can start from
Yeah, we have many dishes.
that defines who you are.
Yeah, we have many dishes, traditional dishes that define
Anyone?
Like among the Christians, there is the Sorpatel, Vindaloo, and so many others. Different communities, the Hindus and the Christian, they have different dishes. And we have sweets that are typically Goan, like the Neerjas and the bibinkas and dodol and so many others that we make, for instance, at the Christmas time. And wherever Goans go, they do make these dishes. Just the other day I was talking to a gentleman. He was not born in Goa, but he is of Goan origin. He was brought up in Mozambique, one of the Portuguese colonies, and now he is in Lisbon and he's conducting workshop on Goan food. And he says people there in different parts of the world, the Goans might have forgotten the Konkani language, certain customs, certain tradition, but the food is still on. People still try to make these dishes.
Lathika, I would have to say pandi curry because it's come to define us. But I would also say the kurd palau, which is not so well known, mutton palau, which is it's very different. It's a sort of a dark green palau which is full of coriander and mint, and it's eaten at weddings traditionally. But to go back to something you said earlier about how food is changing, the tragedy is that most of our weddings are catered now. So you will find that in weddings the food has changed drastically. In fact, quite recently a friend of mine called up to say she was going to a wedding and she said very excitedly, I'm looking forward to the palau. And then she came back and she said there's no palau anymore, I'll have to make it myself. So it would be, yes, it would be pandi curry and it would be the palau, which is not so well known.
Yeah, now, any other question?
No, actually I would like to say what defines us. For the Kashmiri Pandits, it's the damalu. For the Kashmiri Pandit. But for the Muslim, it is the gushtaba, which is a meat mutton ball cooked in yogurt gravy. And it's, you can't even tell if it is mutton. It's pounded so fine, it's like a paste, you know. So for Muslims, the gushtaba, and we also have a term, gushtaba diplomacy. If you want to win over somebody's heart, you offer Gushtaba. And the Kashmiri Pandits offer a damalu because nobody else makes it the way the Kashmiri Pandits do.
So do you agree that food is a marker
Of course, for Kashmiri Pandits, food is a marker of identity.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I started with that because I said it was Pesana Power during Lent, because it actually really reminds me of our heritage. Yeah. So I wanted to know what each of you thinks define.
There is a question, excuse me, why do the Kashmiris say give me a Badgardan?
Batgardan, the Kashmiri phrase, yes, that is very appropriate. Batgardan means if you want to win over somebody, if you want a favor from somebody, the only thing that will really make him your slave for life is if you offer him good food. Some of them are. I think the Gushtaba diplomacy certainly.
I think we have to close this session. It was very interesting. We heard about food in the south, in Kerala, in food, and up north in Kashmir. Thank you for participating in this session.